Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking with Chef Daniel Swift. My name is Jackie Boland. I'm the Community Outreach Director for AARP Hawaii, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight for the last in our series where we're celebrating Hawaii's diverse cuisine. Tonight, we're going to be seeing a demonstration of how to make Vietnamese phao. Now, I want you to know that I looked up the pronunciation because when I was in my 20s, I called it pho. And then when I was in my 30s, I called it pho. But according to the internet, it's phao. So if you already knew that, you're smarter than I am. Let's see. I think most of you know that AARP is a membership organization for people 50 and older. What we do for everyone. And the purpose of this series is really to connect you with something that's engaging while we're all home, with the COVID, and also to help you try to fit things into your lifestyle that can help it make it a little bit more healthy. If you're new to this event, you might not know it, but we only use the chat if we have a technical issue or so that I can contact you if you've won one of our door prizes. We also don't use the raise hand feature. So if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A if it's for Chef Daniel Swift. If it's a technical question, you can of course put it into the chat. I will be doing 3 random number drawings for the uala leaf seasonings. Especially for those of you who signed in but only used an initial, it's very important that you respond back to me with your full name at least, but preferably your name and email so that I can contact you to find out where you'd like to have that mailed to. Now, without further ado, I'd like to just introduce Chef Daniel Swift, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to him. You're on, Daniel.
Thanks, Jackie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I've always got to make sure I've got my mouse squared away. The laptop's far away. So welcome, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. And Jackie, thank you for the pronunciations because I call it pho. And I assume that I'm saying it incorrectly. So I apologize if I am not. But this is, as Jackie mentioned, our last class in the series that's celebrating the diversity of Hawaii and the many people that make up this great state. So it is going to be just a short break for us, and we'll pick up again in January. We do have next week a holiday meal special with Chef Dale Thomas, where we'll be preparing like a traditional Christmas or Thanksgiving meal. That one is a little bit longer. I think it's a 60-minute class, and I believe it is on the 17th. So check your calendar for that.
Can I just jump in there for a second, yeah, Daniel? I did send out a notice and a couple people caught a typo. So it is still the Thursday, the 17th, not the 16th. So if you're wondering about that, it's the 17th. And then another person did let us know that the gravy recipe is missing. So I will be sending that out.
Okay. I will be writing that and forwarding it. I'm not sure how I missed that, but thank you for that, Jackie. And then the series that we're planning for next year is somewhat open. So we had a number of people fill out a survey. So we have a lot of ideas. But again, Jackie and myself and everyone at AARP encourages you to let us know, what you might like to see. So we know Pupus is coming up and a bunch of other ones, but we're happy to craft whatever the interest is. So just let us know and we're happy to help. So tonight you should have the recipe. If you didn't get it, just email me at danswift@hawaii.edu. I believe Jackie sent it out already. And overall, it's really a pretty straightforward dish. I'm not going to say it's a simple dish necessarily because this is one of those traditional dishes that a lot of people grew up with, and many of us, if not all of us, eat in restaurants on a regular basis. It's all rooted in the stock, but there's a lot of love there. So I don't want to go and say that this is really easy to make, but I'm going to show you a couple tricks that can make it quicker to get to the end result that we're looking for. So in the recipe, there's sort of 3 components to it. One is the making of the broth, and we'll go over the ingredients that are in that. And then the other is the soup itself, which it can be vegetarian. It doesn't have to be meat-based. Tonight I have a vegetarian-based broth, and then I also made a chicken-based broth. Sometimes it may be pork as well, but usually it's chicken or beef. And then the last part is just the garnish that goes with it, and that's the traditional items that you'd see on the table that are brought out with the soup. So I did want to mention, though, as we always try to focus on at least one sort of technique or one theoretical aspect of cooking so that you can broaden your knowledge and your horizons in that regard. So tonight I was just talking about stock versus broth. So very, very simple. We run into, sometimes it's used synonymously, the term, but traditionally a stock is made with bones, bones only. And a broth is often made, or more often made, with the meat. So it may have some bones in there, some cartilage in there as well. But that is the primary difference here. And what I made today, or what I'll show you, is on the chicken side, had the bone-in breast. So the meat is there and the bone is there. So I would call that a broth more than a stock. So this is the cooked one here. This is some raw I wanted to talk about a little bit as we go into the ingredients. But just keep that in mind. If you're using meat in your slow simmer, you're creating a broth. If you're using bones only, it's generally considered to be a stock. So also you can just purchase the broth or the bouillon in cans already made for you, which is a great and convenient option for you to use. So without further ado, I'd like to just kind of jump into the ingredients that are going into the, in this case, stock, or broth, because I've got some meat that's going in there, or it could be vegetarian. So I just want to run through the ingredients really quick. I've got a cinnamon stick. I've got some sliced ginger, some star anise, some onion, an onion quartered, a tiny bit of sugar, and a little bit of fish sauce here. And then the broth that I have, I actually made this base with a little bit of the Better Than Bouillon broth. So it's a vegetarian one. It's an easy way to make a really kind of flavorful broth and get you a head start and not worry about having to make a stock or a broth on your own. So I'm going to just simply add that in here. And as I do that, I want to, feel free to ask questions, but I also want to point out probably the best, most convenient product that I've run across in this regard for making this dish. And it's this little spice packet called Faux Ho, or Hoa. I'm probably not pronouncing that right either, but it's these great little spice packets. And it's like a tea bag, and it's got all of the spices you need already inside to make a really delicious broth. I fortified it with a little bit of ginger. I also added the cinnamon stick and the star anise, but it is in there, so you don't need to do that if you don't want to. It's a really simple way to get a delicious tasting stock or broth, depending on what else you're adding to it. So I'm just simply going to add these ingredients, and the sugar is kind of optional. It's up to you. You may even choose to wait until the end. I'm only adding a small amount here. So this one works very well. I tested this recipe already. But if you wanted to eliminate that, you certainly could do that also if you're watching your sugar intake. So that's not a problem at all. And then the last thing I do is throw in this great little pouch. So that works out awesome. I'm turning it on high right now until I bring it up to temperature. It starts to boil, and then I'll reduce it to a simmer and then allow it to infuse those flavors in the broth from the vegetables and the herbs and spices as well. And before I drop in this chicken, I just want to take a second to show you. These are thighs here. Earlier I picked up a breast. That's what I'm using in the finished dish, but I picked up a packet of thighs so that I could use it at home. And this will be the one that I'll use for this stock here, or the broth that we're making. And I just wanted to point out the amount of fat. You can easily remove the skin. If you're watching your fat intake, I recommend that. And I'll show you why, because these are bone-in thighs, as this was a bone-in breast. And And the amount of skin on this one is really not that bad. It's pretty standard. So I can just simply take it off if I don't want that in my stock or my broth. I can also leave it on and remove the skin afterwards, like I will with the one a little bit later. But I'm going to leave this one just like that. But what I wanted to show you is if you take a look at this one, this is the same thigh, but the amount of skin and the amount of fat that's on that is substantially more. So if I were to throw this whole entire thing in, I would just end up with a little bit more fat on top of my broth, on top of my stock. So I would have to ladle it off and remove it. But that's sort of up to you to decide. For this next one, I'm just going to take the skin off and leave the skin on the plate. And I'm going to drop the bone and the meat inside here. Now, keep in mind, if these are the traditional ingredients, you could also choose to add something that makes it your own. Maybe you want a little lemongrass in there, or you want to throw in a carrot or something. It's up to you, but we're just kind of trying to focus on the kind of the primary traditional ingredients that would go into it. Okay. And then a couple of the other ingredients that go into it, of course, are the rice noodles. So this is, I think, Three Ladies brand I picked up. Yeah, Three Ladies brand. I just got this at Times last night. And it's just the Vietnamese rice vermicelli. And there are a lot of different brands, and you may even find there's some differences in the preferences that people have. Some prefer the thinner one. This is a really, really thin noodle. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can switch over and have you take a look at it. It's really, really thin, almost like angel hair pasta. They also make a little bit wider, flatter noodle that's traditionally used by a lot of people as their choice of noodle. And some of the ones that I found in some of the different brands simply just require you to pour boiling water over them and allow them to sit for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then you can strain it and utilize them. This particular one requires boiling, so that was done in advance in the kitchen and then simply strained. So we boiled it in lightly salted water for about 7 minutes, 8 minutes, and then we strained it, and we end up with the cooked noodles. So this is something that can be done in advance. Very, very easy to do. And then you can put it in the refrigerator. So obviously in a restaurant setting, you're not cooking the noodles to order. They're done in large batches, separated out and chilled, and then they're utilized as we go. So this works very well. And that's about a serving. What I did is cooked 2 packs this size, 2 bundles this size, and it ended up being about 1 portion per bundle, depending on the amount of noodles that you like. But if you have extra, you can always save them for later if you want. Okay. No questions, Jackie?
There's quite a few questions.
Okay, you want to go ahead?
Sure.
Sorry.
So can you repeat, was it faux hoa that you were saying
Yeah,
was
absolutely.
the packet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me hold
And
it
then
up here.
do you know if that is gluten-free?
That's a great question. Let me hold the pack up first.
And does it have MSG? I suppose folks could look when they go to the grocery store for sure.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's the brand. It's got a little flag, so it must be made in the US. And I tried to read the instructions earlier. The font is like 1. So I think I would need a magnifying glass or to take a picture of it. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that right at the moment, but I'll pass it off to Alice. My wife's here tonight.
You know, one thing I've learned to do as my eyesight has declined is I just look it up on the internet. I look up the company and the product, and then I can enlarge it to the size that I want to see. So
yeah, it's
folks
kind of hard to read that one. And that was picked up in Chinatown. Steve has a friend that has a shop in town. It's called Lao Asian Market, and it's a Laotian market, but they have a lot of Vietnamese traditional items as well. And that little packet, that little box comes with 4 packs in it, which makes about a gallon of broth per pack, and it's $2.35. So if you really want to like talk about being fast and efficient with that packet and some either vegetable broth of your choice or beef bouillon or cubes or any convenience product that's used to make the natural or neutral broth, add that to it and you're set. And a little bit of the fish sauce, sugar's up to you.
Okay, and so just to clarify, so Deborah says the recipe has 1/2 cup of foul spice blend for 3 quarts of water. So you're just using one bag?
Yeah, in this case, one packet. Because
Okay.
when I wrote the recipe, I hadn't found the store. I knew they had it. So I was looking at the different ones that were available online, but we did find it locally. So I went with that one. And the instructions are on the box if you choose to buy that.
Okay, and then where is, somebody's asking where the fish sauce is located, and I'll just answer that you can find that in the Asian section of any grocery store. Is the faux or foul hoa in lieu of fish sauce? A couple people are asking.
No, I would still add the fish sauce. You're not going to get that. It just takes care of the spices. So, and then at the bottom of your recipe, I list the ingredients that are in the spice blends or the traditional spice blends. So rather than going out and purchasing all of them separately and then creating your own blend and then having them sit in your cupboard, I always recommend things like this. Also, another popular one is like pumpkin spice. Rather than buying cinnamon and clove and all the others, just buy the spice that's pumpkin spice. It's already mixed and blended for you together, and then you don't have to measure out 4 or 5 different ones. So just a kind of a convenience product, really.
Okay, but Maxine really wants to know which spices it is. So is that star anise, cinnamon, ginger, and spice? I don't know what.
Correct. And coriander seed as well. Yeah. So traditional is cinnamon stick or ground cinnamon, coriander, fennel seed, cloves, star anise, and oftentimes black cardamom pod, which you probably have a hard time finding locally. Maybe you could, but a lot of that would be a slightly more expensive one as well, and you're not going to just get a few pods. So it is more convenient, I think, to get something like that that's already pre-prepared.
And if somebody's doing their own, they're wondering, do they need to grind it?
Yes, absolutely. Just use your coffee grinder if you have one at home where you're grinding coffee. Because if you're buying cinnamon stick, you'd obviously need to grind it. If you bought whole clove, you'd need to grind it. You can get ground clove though. You can get ground cinnamon. Most of these you can get ground. Star anise you could even leave whole and throw in like I did here to have that little extra boost. If you like the flavor of ginger, maybe you want to add an extra slice of ginger in there as well. So it sort of just depends on your preference and your taste. So if you want to purchase those ingredients yourself, no problem, but you would need to grind them if they're in the whole form for sure.
And so one last question before we pause and let you get back to cooking is, can you substitute artificial sugar in place of the regular sugar?
Yeah, I would say yes. I honestly don't even really notice a lot of sweetness when I order an IFA, but there's a little bit in there. But if you were to omit it, I don't think a lot of people would notice. But if you do want that sweetness, you absolutely could use your favorite artificial sweetener.
Thank you. Okay.
So I'm tasting the broth that I'm making here. And it already has some flavor, but it's only been about 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes. And the chicken's still raw, but it's going to take you about 30 to 60 minutes to really pull that flavor out. It'll go quicker with the packs that are here. But to cook that chicken through, if you're using meat or a pork, or if you're doing beef bones to make a beef flavored stock, then you want to make sure that you just control the time to finish the product that's going in and get the desired flavor that you're looking for in the end. So I have one here that's already done. I'm going to just prep my chicken. The other things that go in obviously are, I've got the basil. I even have some cilantro. My wife loves cilantro, and you'll see I didn't include that on the recipe, but it's up to you. If you like cilantro in it, oftentimes it's served with cilantro, sometimes with mint as well. And then I looked up the sawtooth herb. It's like a long herb that has a jagged edge. That's also known as Mexican coriander. Oftentimes you'll find that on your plate of garnishes as well, but traditionally it's just the basil, lime. Sometimes you'll see lemon, sliced jalapeno or red pepper, and bean sprouts. So it's kind of up to you. I mean, if you have a favorite that you want to substitute or try in there, you certainly can. Since my wife is here tonight, I'm going to pull a little cilantro and put it on there because she'll be eating this. And, you can slice. I didn't slice these because I'd sliced the jalapeno. You can slice the red peppers and have them on there. Just be careful not to make it too hot if you're serving it to guests. And then here I have my my chicken. So I'm just going to take the skin off, and I'm going to cut a couple slices to go in the bowl. So I've already taken the bowl here that I prepared a little earlier with the noodles that we'd pre-cooked. Got enough for one large serving in there already. I would then just need a few slices of chicken. If you're doing beef, oftentimes it's raw. So the hot broth will cook the beef. But with chicken, you don't want to put raw chicken in and expect the broth to cook it. It's not going to be hot enough to bring it to the temperature that will cook it to 165, which is the safe temperature for poultry. So I'm going to just put in a few slices of the chicken across there. A little bit of cilantro, a couple of jalapenos. And I like a lot of bean sprouts in mine. I'm going to put those over here on the side. The lime I'll squeeze in fresh at the very, very end. And a little bit of basil. Now, some people like to break the leaves up. It depends on the size. These days you can get some that are like really large. I'll usually take the top portion and then split them at least in half. And if they're really big, then I'll go maybe thirds, about like that. And then I can set that off to the side. I like a little bit of shaved raw onion. So I'll sprinkle some of that in here. And then what we can do, you can notice over here, if I switch the camera, you'll see as it started to come to a boil. And when your stock or broth comes to a boil initially, a lot of times you're going to find that you'll get what's called the scum, and you want to skim it. It's just impurities that might be in the meat or coagulated blood if there's a joint that had a little bit of blood on it. And we just use a ladle to simply take that out. You can sort of see maybe that's a little bit brown and kind of murky looking, kind of hard to see, but we want to remove that. And now that it's boiling, I can just remove that foam and reduce it to a little bit of a simmer and let that go, like I said, for about 30 to 60 minutes or so. Shouldn't take really any longer than that. And I'll just swap this out with one that's done. And I will tell you that those packets, I mean, the smell is just incredible. So if you're a fan of this dish, then you really want to, and save some time. I highly recommend that. It's very aromatic. It's almost, I've been keeping these in my desk for about the last month since we purchased them, and my office smells wonderful. It's a great, I need to put one in my car. It's a great air freshener. So, any
And
other questions?
Irene looked that up, and apparently there is no MSG in it. So
Oh, great.
good to know. Thanks, Irene.
Thank you.
So we do have a couple more questions.
Yep.
Is the fish sauce dark or light?
This one's a little dark. Actually, this is darker than most of the ones that you see. And there's different brands. I lean a little bit more towards the less fish sauce side of things. A lot of people love this. It's a great sauce for dipping with chilies and sugar and lime juice and things like that. But it's probably not my most favorite flavor. So the lighter color ones I find to be a little bit more mild. This one's a little stronger. But you can find both, a little bit darker or a little bit lighter.
Okay, and then Chinatown has different kinds of basil, and I don't know which Thai basil looks like.
Yeah, Thai basil has a little bit of purple in the stem. So that's probably your easiest way to distinguish it. I think if I show you, if you take a look at these stems, there's a little bit of color to them, a little bit of purple. And I'll switch to the overhead for a second to look. Whereas a sweet basil is straight up green, this one has a little bit of purple in it. So hopefully you can see that.
And the
it's
leaves
also,
are kind of pointy, yeah?
Yeah, it's generally a less broad and a little bit more pointy and a little bit more robust as well. Sweet basil, the leaves can be extremely large, extremely flavorful, delicious, but they can tend to go limp much more quickly. So Thai basil is traditionally what you will find, although sometimes you'll see sweet basil as well.
And Helen's wondering, did you actually put the entire seasoning with the wrap in the broth, or did you empty the seasoning from the wrapper into the broth?
No, I left it in the bag, just like a tea bag, basically. So I'll pull it out here and take a look at it.
Okay, and everybody's still asking where you bought the seasoning. You said it was in Chinatown, but you didn't name the store,
it's
right?
called Lao Market, Lao, Asian Market. And it's about $2.35 for one pack. Special thanks to Steve for getting that.
And then Donna is wondering, if someone's allergic to shellfish, would they be allergic to fish sauce? Or is that a question for the doctor?
I wouldn't want to say no. Read the label, but traditionally it should not have anything to do with shellfish. Yeah.
And if you're using a pressure cooker to make the broth, Tanya is wondering how long you should cook it.
If you're using a what? I'm sorry?
A pressure cooker.
Oh, good question. Probably about a quarter of the time. If you're using a pressure cooker, you probably get away with about 15 minutes maximum. Once everything's in, you're really just trying to bring the flavor out of the chicken or the bones or the herb packets or whatever, and get it into the broth. So it's always about 4 times faster when you're using a pressure cooker. So you might even find a recipe for that, but it shouldn't certainly be more than 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think you can do it in 7 in the Instant Pot.
Yeah. I know there's some Instant Pot professionals in this class, so Jackie is one of them. And then I've got, this broth is already done and fragrant. And if I ladle a little bit out, you might see chunks of onion, little particles of chicken, because this is a chicken broth. And I don't really want those in my soup. There's nothing wrong with it, absolutely. But, in the kitchen, we would make a large batch of this and then strain it. So I don't have time to do that. I don't want to make a mess. So I just got a small strainer. And I'm just going to ladle a little bit of this over the top, and it's boiling. So my noodles and everything are room temperature. So this should heat it up just fine. Really no different than, if you're ordering a to-go order from a restaurant today and taking it home. Do be very careful because the broth is hot, and I'm just ladling it over the top, and everybody's a little different. Some people like a lot of soup. Some people like a lot of noodle. Sort of up to you. And now I've got the chicken in here, a couple thighs that I cooked that I can then pull out and utilize in the next batch or the next bowl or the next recipe even. That will really infuse some good flavor into it. And then I also have the traditional sides, a couple of them, the hoisin sauce, some chili oil. So usually just throw a spoon in those and pass it around and let people do the finishing with a little bit of lemon or lime and the amount of chili or hoisin that they want. Or if you want a little more fish sauce. And then that would basically be it. So those that hot broth will heat up those noodles. It's still steaming. I'll switch to the overhead really quick. Can taste the broth here. That's very good. So I like a little bit more of the chili in mine. I'm serving this one to Alice, my wife, tonight. So she has a special way of eating it. She uses her spoon, her chopsticks, and she'll put a little bit of noodle, get a little bit of broth, put a little chili on it, and a teeny bit of hoisin. She builds each bite individually. So everybody's a little bit different in the way they eat it. I'm more like season everything and chow down, but super simple, very delicious, and a great addition to the cultural dishes that make Hawaii as special as it is. So I'm happy to answer any other questions that you guys might have. Or
We do have about 9 more questions.
Okay.
But since it's 5:30, I will just announce that the door prize winners were Bev Silva, Sharon Wilde, and Lauren Sakuoka. And I chatted with you guys, but since you signed in with your full name, I can actually locate your email, so you don't need to do anything except respond to my email tomorrow with your address. So questions. Linda would like to have you hold up the Mexican cilantro close to the camera to see what it looks like. It's the same as Chinese parsley, right?
Yeah, this is what I have here is just, this is regular cilantro, or sometimes called Chinese parsley. But this is cilantro. This is separate. I couldn't find or didn't purchase any of the Mexican coriander or the sawtooth herb, which is the long, about half the restaurants you go to in order pho will serve that. It's a longer flat leaf, about as wide as my thumb, and the edges are very sharp, like a saw. And it tastes like cilantro, but it's a different herb. They say it's a little bit stronger. I'm not a huge fan of it personally. I would rather use cilantro, but in this case, I just have regular Chinese parsley, or we call it cilantro also.
Which is like the hardest thing to grow in your garden in Hawaii, I can tell
Yeah,
you.
extremely fragile, and yeah, and dill and all of these really fragile herbs are challenging.
So Cindy says, I see star anise. Did you add all the spices from your own spice blend in addition to the packet, or is that just there for a visual?
Both. It's there for a visual, because Steve, when he went and purchased the packs for me, grabbed a couple small bags. They actually had the little bags with cinnamon sticks and star anise. I threw in 2 extra, just a star anise because I like it, and 1 cinnamon stick because I was doing a larger batch earlier. So that's up to you, but I do like the visual. I try to put out an example of everything that we use kind of on the side. In this case, it was like, the chicken broth. This is a reduced sodium one, and the fish sauce and the noodles and everything. But it is also in the finished dish.
Awesome. And then a few people just wanted to point out that Amazon sells the faux hoa. Cindy says, the Indian market on the corner of Eisenberg and Beretania has black cardamom. When I make my spiced cranberry jelly, I put the pod in hot water and then open it to get the seeds out. So what would you grind, the pod or the seeds?
I would grind everything in a spice grinder into a fine powder. That's what I would do. I think you could do the whole thing. Absolutely.
Okay. And Melvin says he had a whole duck for Thanksgiving with the innards. Can you make a broth with the bones and the innards? And what type of vegetables would you add to it?
Great question. You could make, if it's only bones, then, as we learned tonight, it would be a stock. But if there's meat in there as well, it would be a broth. But absolutely, duck would be incredible to make a delicious broth. And it would go great with this because the star anise and the traditional flavors that oftentimes accompany duck would be great. In terms of the innards, it depends. Yeah, I would probably not put like anything maybe other than like the heart in there, maybe the gizzards, but liver and things like that would not be ideal. The texture and the color might come off a little bit on your broth or your stock. But yeah, I think you could certainly use that to make it. And then in terms of vegetables, I would say, mirepoix, it's definitely onions, always onions. Carrots optional, but carrots and duck go together so well. Maybe a little bit of celery, but it can tend to get overpowering, so do be careful with that. But just get creative. That's another thing that we try to encourage folks to do. Maybe you have some leftover vegetables as well, so you could look at what you have to go with it and utilize that to make a great dish when you're done.
Cool. And then there's a lot of questions about the next classes, which I'll answer in a minute. But the last question was, do you have a brand of fish sauce that you prefer?
On most of these, I can't pronounce the brand, but I can tell you what it looks like. It's more of a square bottle, and it has a round blue label. It's part of a band that's kind of yellowish with the round blue, and you'll see the color will be a lot lighter than this. This one looks like soy sauce. That one will look more like ginger ale on the lighter side. And I think
I have one I could grab maybe.
Yeah, and I think some of these products end up getting darker as they sit. So the older they get, sometimes the darker they will become, not unlike honey and some other products, right? If you've ever left honey in the back of your cupboard, I have a bottle of honey that was a 5-pounder that's probably 15 years old, and it's this color now, and it's crystallized, but the flavor is incredible, and I just dissolve it before I use it, so it works good for that. So
surprisingly, I didn't have one, but I'm going to, Helen put a question in the chat. She says, if you use bean sprouts, do you parboil first?
I do not, but it's always safe to rinse them. Keep in mind, you're adding a boiling stock or broth, so that will take care of anything. Boiling's 212, most of your bacteria and salmonella and things like that will be taken care of at 160, 165. Definitely 200, 212 will take care of it. So if you're serving your soup and it's not too hot to eat right away, then the broth probably wasn't hot enough. It should be boiling and then go right into the bowl.
When I ordered in the restaurant with the steak, I always order the meat uncooked on the side because I hate it when it's overcooked, and you put it in and it cooks in like 5 seconds because they slice it so thinly.
Absolutely.
I would never do that. I would never do that with chicken, of course.
No, not with chicken. And keep in mind, and many of you have had this, you can make fish balls, you can do sausage. What did we do? The pork filling that we did last week for the pot stickers would be great, and just in a little ball and dropped in with the soup to flavor like a little meatball. And that would be great in there. So, honor the tradition, but at the same time, keep in mind that you can get creative and utilize things that you might not have thought about or not have seen before. So
Gary was asking, how would you prepare beef and when to cook it, which we kind of talked about, but would you use the same seasoning packet?
I would use the same seasoning packet, but with beef bones. Normally with beef, you'd just be making a stock using the bones. You get a lot richer flavor. It depends on the type of bone. If it's a veal bone from younger cows, obviously you get more gelatin, you get more body, more flavor from it. But it kind of depends on what you want. So when Jackie's ordering the raw meat, it's not brisket, right? It's a different cut.
Very thinly sliced.
Yeah, thinly sliced. So a tough cut of meat, like brisket, a tendon, you'll find in there a lot, parts of the beef dish. They need to be cooked longer. So it just sort of depends. Now, if you were doing this at home, any quality steak would work. Thinly sliced flank steak, sirloin, ribeye, anything like that would work great. The trick is just to get it thin enough to where you can make sure that it cooks in the broth. As you're dipping it in. If I'm thinking like Jackie's like me, one at a time, we dip it in to cook it and then eat it. So it's like medium rare as we go, right? So everything doesn't get well done. But if you're ordering soup with tendon and other cuts of meat, then it's already cooked low and slow for a long period of time and then put in the soup.
So people have been asking, is this the last class? No, it's the last of our Celebrating Diverse Cuisines series, but Dan did add on the December 17th, 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Holiday meal session. You're making, I believe, a roast chicken, potatoes, gravy, and what's the vegetable?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
We'll have to look.
Surprise. We'll
Yeah.
we'll
If
find
you
out
haven't,
together.
if you haven't registered for it, you won't get the recipes. So please be sure to register for the session so that you get the recipes. And then for next year, we've decided to give Dan a little bit of a break. So we won't be starting until I think the 3rd week of January, possibly actually the 4th week of January. And I believe we're going to start off with the appetizers, the poo-poos, even though it's a little bit late for your New Year's party. But what I wanted to ask folks is, we haven't selected which poo-poos yet, but I thought what might be fun is if some of you have favorite recipes, like you would recommend them any day of the week because they're so great, and you want to share them with me, I would be happy to share them with everybody else, regardless of whether we end up cooking them. I thought it might be fun to do kind of a poo-poos collection, if you will, because I was just introduced to jalapeno poppers last year. I can't believe I went my whole life without ever eating one of those. And now it's like, oh my goodness, I want to tell everybody I know about them. So if you have something like that, please share it with me and I will share it with the group. And then we haven't yet decided on the schedule, but again, I think we're starting the 4th week of January and we're going to stick to Thursdays if possible.
And you know, Jackie, for those jalapeno poppers, that stuffing we made last week, that pork filling, split those poppers in half and pack them and grill them or roast them. And that's what we really want to try to do, is make sure that you solidify, like I always say, a new technique or two per class. And then they start to overlap, right? So even with the brisket or the beef and what cut to use, dipping a raw cut of meat into here from beef would need to be a tender one, so you know which kind. And they start to roll from one class to the next. So I can't thank everyone enough for the friendly emails and the support, and to AARP for making this possible for everybody.
Well, thank you so much. And I've been making my poppers with cream cheese and bacon, so I might have to go with your lower calorie option there.
Yeah, it would work great. So, and then also,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know if there are any more questions. I'm happy to take them and whatnot.
Oh, it looks like we got one more. It says, is the 17th class on the same link? Yes, it will be, but again, if you don't register, you won't get the recipes. So please sign up for the class. And I do want to warn you that next year, AARP has switched us to a different Zoom account, so it will be different links for next year. All righty, everybody. Well, have a great evening, and Dan, have a great time eating your fowl, and we'll see you next week for the holiday meal preparation.
Yep. Thanks, Jackie. And a quick shout out. I don't know if Jackie Malley's watching tonight, but Jackie Boland and I would like to thank her for initiating this series, and we appreciate her and everyone for watching and participating. So have a great day.
Mahalo,
Safe holiday,
everybody.
and we'll see you next year.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.